I think we're going to make a start now. Right. First of all, hold on. Great. Okay. Right. First of all, welcome everyone, and thanks for making the time to attend this event. My name's Stephen Anderson. I'm the enterprise coach for the Forward Trust, and I'd like to welcome you all. And at this stage here, can I introduce Tev? Tev, can you give us a wave and introduce yourself, please?
Good morning, everyone. I was just too busy trying to type a few bits and pieces into the chat function. Thank you all very, very much for joining. Hope you find it very useful. And I'll just be kind of monitoring the chat in the background. And this is very much Stephen's event. And yeah, look forward to really enjoying this event. I hope everybody finds it as useful as we hope they will. So yeah, thanks very much, Stephen.
Great, thanks, Tev. Right, first of all, this is the first of 2 masterclasses that we're running today and tomorrow. Today's going to be all about grants and grant writing, really positioning yourself best to apply for grants and source grants, and tomorrow an introduction to tendering. Before we start, just going to go through some Zoom etiquette. In order to minimize background noise, can you all mute yourself during the event? And please be conscious too about background sound too. Also be aware that this event is being recorded. So if you want to, please turn the video option off. And for those that are inexperienced about using the Zoom platform, me included, you can alter your view options on your screen by clicking the speaker view on the top row during the event. So that will change your viewing position. And please feel free to put questions or comments in the chat. My colleague Tev will be monitoring that and will be making note of all questions you've got. Right. Just before we start I just want to make you aware of the things that enterprise support does in the Forward Trust. I mean, we've got a range of events coming up, and I just want to take time to be aware of them. On September the 16th, we've got a very interesting event called Challenge. And basically, it's a Dragon's Den style event where people can pitch for a £500 cash injection into their business before a panel of experts. And that's going to be happening on the 16th of September. So look out for that in Eventbrite. I know some of you have registered for that. It'll be the same process of that you've registered for this one. But it's going to be a very unique event that we're doing, and a lot of planning has gone into that. And we've got a panel of speakers. Plus there's £500 up for pitching your business idea. So for that event there. And also on the 30th of September, we've got an event called Art, which we will have inspirational speakers speaking about their business journey and sharing their ups and downs of developing their business. And also during that Enterprise Club event, it'll be a chance for our members and network with each other too, to share a lot of what they're doing. So 16th of September and the 30th of September are 2 dates to put in your diary. If you need more information, our details, me and Tev's details are going to be in the chat box. Feel free to email me and we can talk more about it if you want to participate in the Enterprise Challenge event, which I would highly recommend. And the final thing to really make you aware of is that we do have a small startup grant available for people to apply for. It is a £1,000 grant, and it's available from the Forward Trust for people who want to apply and they have a business plan in place. So keep that in mind there too. Right, let's get started on the main topic of today, which is grants writing and positioning yourself for applying for grants. Let me introduce Genna. Genna is our Senior Grants Officer. Genna first came to the charity sector in 2010 and has worked for several major charities in the business development and fundraising sector. She is currently employed by the Forward Trust as the Senior Grants Officer and looking to voluntarily support grant charitable organizations with guidance material, applications, review, and prospects research. Since 2018, she has also been associated to Underwood Consulting, where she has worked on a diverse range of small to medium enterprises specializing in trust and foundation fundraising. I really appreciate Genna's time for putting together the information and sharing her knowledge and expertise. Genna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. It's great to be here today. It's my first presentation I'll be giving, so apologies if I'm a little bit nervous, but I hope that I can impart something of value on you today. So am I able to start sharing my screen now, or is that okay? Yeah? Yep. Amazing. Fantastic. Hopefully this is going to work then.
Right, hopefully.
It won't let me share.
Right. Hold on. Try that now. Something's coming through. Excellent. Can see it.
You can see it, yeah? So I'm just going to make sure I can flick through. Great, fantastic. So in my presentation today, the notes are quite comprehensive. But the whole reason for that is so that anyone listening can just use that as a printout. So rather than writing notes, I'm going to talk quite fast. This is going to be a whistle-stop tour, but this is all here for you so that you can go back and refer to it. So I'm not going to go through the contents, but this is for you in the future, so you can have a look back on it. And get right started with the beginning of what is a grant. So I want you to focus here on what it says at the end, basically. So skip to the end and it says, a grant is more than just a donation. It carries a commitment to deliver particular work and reporting on the impact of that work. So grants are basically funds that you can get from a public body or a charitable trust and foundation or any other grant making institution. And you're going to be using that, investing that money to help you to achieve your mission, to help you achieve a set purpose. So what can a grant do for me and my organisation? Well, exactly that. Focus on what your mission is, and a grant is going to enable you, it's going to give you the financial means to be able to achieve that. Now, if we look at how many grant giving organisations there are in the UK, we've got over 8,000 grant making trusts, it says, and they're giving a total of £8 billion. So there's a lot of potential out there. And these grant makers, they're going to have their own set themes and their own set agendas and criteria. You know, they may have their own mission they want to achieve, but in general, it's going to be that they want to benefit the public. They want to have a social impact, and they're using your organisation as the receptacle for that. So now we're going to go on to funding types. And these are the main funding types, and I've given them different names here because sometimes they will come under different terms and it can get a little bit confusing. But you have your capital funding. So this is if you're applying for something tangible like bricks and mortar or a land purchase or large items of equipment. Then we skip down to the bottom, we've got our project costs, our restricted funding, okay? And this is going to be like a clear project that you have and any costs that relate clearly to that project. It may be something like even a small item like a laptop. So you may have a caseworker that needs a laptop to be able to carry out their duties day to day. It may be for their salary. And then we've got this middle one, which is revenue or core costs, the unrestricted funding, the gold dust of funding. If you can apply for core cost funding, this is what you want to be going for if you can. And this is where you basically have that autonomy to apply where you need to in your organisation. So it's not necessarily restricted underneath any specific project or any specific job title. It's all those back office things as well that are essential for you to run your organisation. So that's the kind of funding that's available. And now you need to know, of course, where you're going to find this funding. So prospects and opportunities. So this is just a really brief snapshot. I'm not going to go through them all because they're all here, and I've given a little definition of all of them, an explanation of exactly what they are. But if you are looking for, if you're looking for prospects, I would go straight to this bottom link, and you can see I put here 101 sources of grants for charities, and this has been produced by Alicia Granger Fundraising. It's a wonderful resource. It will tell you all the main and sometimes obscure actually sources that you may not have come across before, of where you can find different prospects. So there's paid for resources and there's free resources on there as well. I know it's great because I worked on it. So look it up. Now, like I said, this is my list. This is the places that I like to go to, and the only ones I'm going to draw your attention to are Charity Commission Advanced Search. So it says it here, it's the government database, and it's going to have all the trusts and foundations that are registered in there, as well as all registered charities on there. Got a really useful, easy to use search function, and any of these that you're looking for, if you just go into Google, I've checked, and you type any of these terms in, they're going to come up and you're going to be able to find it. Easy to use. And the second one is competitor analysis as well. So any source I go to, whether I'm going to any of these, I will always do some form of competitor analysis. I will look at someone that's delivering the same as me, say a similar project to me, or got a similar mission to me, could be in a certain geographical location. If I'm a small charity and I'm based in a certain area, who's funding them? Have a look. You know, a lot of people put their funders, they thank them, they acknowledge them, their accounts, use that resource. And you can look through their accounts by using the Charity Commission website. So that's where that comes into use again. Getting the most from prospect research. So what's the point in doing prospect research? Basically, it's at the top here. Is it worth me putting an application in? So you want to determine that trust's inclination to give to you. And when you're putting in an application, you're going to want to make it personalised. You're going to want to make it tailored. You're going to want to show them that I'm not just throwing applications out. I've really thought about who I'm applying to. And I've applied to you for this reason. So this is how I've given you how I like to lay out my funding pipeline. At the end of this, if any of you want an example of how I lay this out on a spreadsheet, you can email me and I can send you a version of mine, but adapt it how it works for you. And these are the main headings. Once again, I won't go through absolutely everything because it's all there for you. Have a little look through, and this is the kind of information that I like to record. And I will have got this information via the sources that I mentioned earlier. I'll also do things like I'll go through the funder websites, I'll go on Google searches, I'll Google their trustees. I'll look into articles about them as well. Anything I can use to really personalise and tailor my application to them. For example, I may Google a trustee and see that their charitable trust was set up because they have a family member that has suffered with addiction in the past. So I know if I'm applying for Forward, there's quite a personal connection there. So I may want to make sure I'm working it, well, I'll always work in case studies, but I may want to make sure I'm taking quite an emotive approach to any application I'm putting into them. And I'll also want to make it clear to them. I'll mention things in my covering letter. I'll mention the research I've done. I'll mention the reasons why I'm going to them. Right, top tips then. So when you are carrying out your prospect research, you've gathered all that essential information that I've outlined on the first page. I would say to you, the first thing to do is always skip to the eligibility criteria. So you may find it's painful. You may find a prospect, they look absolutely amazing. You've started filling out all of your pipeline, and you've got all the, you know what grant awards they're giving, what level. You've got a really good idea how you're going to put an application together to them. And then you find a tiny little note and it says, we do not support community interest companies, or we do not fund capital costs, or whatever it is. There'll be an exclusion there, and you go, oh no, okay, we can't apply to them. And it can be quite gutting. So to save yourself a lot of time, skip straight to that as well. Another thing that I would say as well to look at, especially to become more established, but networking. Is there anyone that you know that knows them? Do you have any links, you know, to their trustees at all? Look and explore that. Okay, so creating your case for support. This is really the main part of this presentation. And I know there's a lot of information here. So once again, I'm just going to quickly go over it and then you can go into more depth and read this. So what is your case for support to begin with? Case for support is your blueprint. It's your blueprint for all the applications you're going to make. And if you've got a well-made case for support, it means that when you're coming to make applications, it's going to save you a lot of time. And it also means that you're going to have consistency in your applications too. So you will have free form applications, and that's where you can literally tailor your case for support to a certain trust, and then you can submit it. Or you will have structured applications, which you're going to move on to next. And that's where you're going to have set questions asked you. But both times you're going to be using your case for support as your blueprint for those responses. Starting off, executive summary. I want you to be thinking about the fact that I'm a funder, I'm an administrator for the funder, and it's 10 o'clock at night, and I've got a cup of tea, and I'm tight, and I've got 200 applications to look at, and I've got a pile here and a pile here. I've got a pile that's not eligible and a pile that is eligible. One's going to go in the bin. So having a look through that, I'm going to be giving them, let's say, like 2 minutes of my time. So straight from the beginning, I need to know what's being requested, for what, and the difference it will make. I need them to highlight to me immediately exactly what the project is, how it's fitting, you know, is it fitting with our aims? Can I see it's fitting with our criteria in a snapshot? Okay. Then also thinking about that, building that as well, when they're going to be going into a more in-depth review. So you've got through the first vetting, you're going to want to make it catching. So there was a traditional way of writing applications, and it would start something like, the history of our nonprofit began in 1985 when James and Mary Clark, blah, 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 and it will go on like that. No, try and make it emotive from the beginning. Try and grab your reader's attention. Try and make it urgent. Okay, so you need to really you need to appeal to them. You need to appeal to their heart, and you need to appeal to their head. So what I would say is make sure straight from the beginning that you are being emotive, but also make sure that you're quantifying it as well throughout. Okay. Then you're going to move on to talk about your organisation, talk about yourself, give it authenticity. If you've got life experience as well, talk about all of that. Mention it in there. Why have you created your organisation? What issue have you seen? Okay. Talk about any accolades you have. And you want to go into your project. And this, you want to be really specific here. So, okay, you know, this is, you've talked about your mission, you talked about who you are, talked about why you've created your organisation. So what's your project? What's it going to do? What's it going to be solving? What outputs and outcomes have you decided as well? How are you going to evaluate against things? What added value can you bring? Have you got any particular partnerships? Have you got any particular members of staff that you want to talk about and their experience? And then, of course, you want to be talking also about your impact. And you're going to be proving here that, you know, it's not only working, but it's worthwhile. So highlight any impact that you've had today. And budget and request for support. Think about it from a funder perspective. So you've got, let's say, £100,000 to give out throughout this year. That's a lot of money. You need people to prove to you that they are responsible with that money and they're going to make the most with that funding that you're giving them. So if you want to give somebody, let's say 15 or a few £1,000s, whatever it is, you want them to prove to you that that money is safe with them. You are a safe bet. You're going to invest it wisely. So be exact with your figures. Explain where that comes from. We're not plucking out, you know, figures from the air here. Show financial sustainability of it as well. If you've got other funders, remember trusts and foundations talk to one another. Got other funders on board? Mention them. You've got other ways of raising the rest of the balance? Mention it. And I also like to bring this is personal, but I like to bring it back to the project. So when I'm asking about money, remember in the beginning we said that it's more than a donation. It's about the impact of that donation. So I like to bring it back to the impact. So for example, I put one here. £15,000 is going to fund X amount of hours of intensive one-to-one reintegration support to prison leavers. Now, if I put a case study at the beginning, which I often do, let's say I was talking about a prison leaver called Kyle, and I gave an example of him leaving prison and the impact that we've had on him, I would finish that with reintegration support to X amount of prison leavers, just like Kyle. I'd bring it back to him. Okay, so top tips. Avoid jargon, balance head over heart. Think about your presentation. This is a major thing. Often people think it's not important, but do a little bit of research into the psychology of writing, and it's really, really interesting, and I found it really helpful as well. Learn the difference between outcomes and outputs, really important. I would check out Emma Inslee. She does the Impact Accelerator, and it's fantastic. She does free blogs on there as well. Develop a theory of change. That's really, really helpful as well when it comes to writing your applications, and it comes in use as well if you get invited to an interview. Okay, so have a look into that. Check your budget. Make sure it's exact. You know, you are a safe pair of hands with this funding, okay? And consider a full cost recovery approach. We can talk about that a bit more in the Q&A. This is talking about getting that core cost funding in again. Remember, that is the gold dust of funding. It's hard to get. So then spread your core costs across your applications to try and recoup that back. So making an application, you've already got your case for support. This is just a more structured application. So I've listed here again all of this is my process. This is what I like to do. I won't go for absolutely every point because it's all here. You can all read, you can all see it there. But there's a couple of things I will raise your attention to. So obviously we've got there knowing the guidance, knowing the deadline. Wow, double check that deadline. Okay, just make sure, because it's gutting if you spent a long time and you've got the deadline wrong. Where I've got here, I've talked about create a checklist and a project plan. With that, make sure that if you've got other people working with you on an application, and it'll be the same with bids as well, set yourself realistic deadlines, keep everyone in the loop. Everyone needs to know what they're doing. Teamwork is really important. Having a good rapport if you're working with others as well is really important too. You know, make sure they know the value. Maybe share this presentation with them and say, look, your input could be the difference between us getting this funding or not. Creating framework for your method statements. Remember that, because that will come into my tips later. And also raising clarifications. Speak to people, speak to funders where you need to. Remember they're human beings as well. And, you know, if you've got a question, go to them, ask them, don't be scared of them. And get someone else to read your work. Share it with people. Share it with me if you want to. Share it with, I read to my mum. I read out my applications to her. Does it make sense? And I always think if she knows and she's not necessarily working in the sector, then fantastic. If she knows, then I'm making it clear. So top tips again, character word count. Please double check it and don't trust what the funder said. Write it. If you're doing an online application.
5-minute warning, Jen.
Thank you. If you're doing an online application, I would suggest that you write it up in a Word document so that you've got it safe, because online portals can be really, really irritating and they can lose your work. So don't trust them, but also copy and paste in, like to make sure that the character and word count are correct. Because there's been a couple of times, I'm not gonna like shame any funders, but a couple of times I've gone on and I've gone, right, okay, great, I've got this many words. They didn't mean word count, they meant character count. And then it's painful because you've got to cut down your work. So always check that. Where I spoke about frameworking your answers and having like a project plan in place, that's where we're talking about relationships with colleagues and frontline staff really come into play here, you know. And fundraising, it really is a team effort. And if you are successful, then share that with them. I'm always in contact with the frontline team, and if we get positive feedback, I like to share it with them, so next time I go to them for information, they'll be like, oh, I can really see the value of what I sent to Genna, and then they'll be more inclined to support me in the future. Answer the question. Answer the question, and I have to tell myself this all the time. So build a framework together for your answer. Before I start typing anything, I will outline the salient points. I'll be like, Genna, what do you want to include in here? And it'll be my little tick list. I'll do 3 points, whatever it is. If they've got set guidance, especially for specific questions, I will copy that over to keep me on track. When you're really passionate about a subject, which you will be because this is your organisation, it's very easy to go, oh, I want to talk about everything. And you just want to put it all in there, but we have to streamline it. And this moves on to the next point. Remember, chapter applications, it may be different people scoring each section. So answer the question in hand. Don't be afraid to use bullet points, and also do not sacrifice substance over style. Okay, so you've got your grant, fantastic. What are you going to do now? What's the next step? Well, you want to keep this funder warm. So I was reading recently that so a warm funder, which is a current funder, someone who's already funded you, application is worth between 10 and 20 cold funder applications. So it just shows how important that, you know, having that funder on board is. You want to be going back to them next year for funding. You want to be maybe asking them for multi-year funding. Maybe you want to increase your donation, whatever it is. So when it comes to saying thank you, I like to say thank you whether I'm successful or unsuccessful. It's polite. They've taken their time to consider your application still. So I always like to thank them. Actually, it worked really well recently. I recently had a decline from an organisation, and they loved the project, but they just didn't like the particular element of the project I was asking for funding. They would rather have funded an item. So I was thinking, okay, fine. So they kept in contact with me, and I've got a meeting with them next week, and they've encouraged me to reapply, you know, and they're saying we like the project, and we're going to give you a bit of more of an insight maybe on how to make it a bit more appealing to our trustees. Fantastic, you know, I'm going to use that to my advantage, and when I put my next application in, hopefully we'll be successful. So, you know, keep in contact, and that conversation all came from me saying, thank you so much for your time. Have you got any insight you can offer me? I'd really value your insight. And then it's just common courtesies, of course. Sign any paperwork on time. Makes sense, doesn't it? And as you get funders coming in, you're going to want to establish a pipeline, so like a funding database or something like that, so that you know when you're meant to report back to them. Everyone in the project knows what is expected of them, when it needs to be reported back. Don't do the bare minimum. Keep funders warm between reports with, these are just some examples, but get creative. Invitations to events, service visits, case studies, impact reports, acknowledgements in your accounts and your reports, whatever it is. My favourite out of all of them is case studies. I love to send case studies, and especially with new funders, of course, I'll get permission first for the level of contact. That's really important. But I love to send them case studies. It'll be, we've recently had a new funder this year, and I've sent them 2 already this year, and they followed one case study up with another donation, a follow-up donation. They've pledged to help us with the big give, and that was after we just sent them a case study. So that's fantastic. So they're just examples of it working. Thank you. Just get really creative with it, okay? And get really creative with your thank you letters, and make it authentic and make it personal. Like I've said here, I like to get personal messages from our beneficiaries. I like to get a message from sometimes larger funders. I get one from our CEO because it sounds really official. But throughout all of that, and I've highlighted it, obviously, seek contact permission with that, okay? And I think we're just on to our final slide now, so I can breathe again. And if you want to connect with me, please do, and connect with other fundraisers. I really encourage it. You know, we're all lovely, we're all supportive. We may have insight to certain funders, or we may even have, you know, lists of prospects that we're able to share with you. Whatever it is, we can read over each other's applications and give constructive feedback on it and tell you what works. So connect with me, connect with other fundraisers. You know, we are all a community here, and we're all here to help one another.
Thank you very much, Jen. Much appreciated. Tev, do you want to give a few comments?
Just very quickly before we move on to Natalie, Genna, that was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Just to reiterate once again that the slides will be shared a few days after the event. And just in addition, I've seen a few questions pop up in the chat function. I am taking note of them. They have not been forgotten, but I think perhaps we should wait for Natalie to continue her presentation and then we can deal with those at the end. So keep them flying through, guys, and I've noted them and we can put them to our panel at the end. Thank you, Stephen.
Great. Thanks, Deb. First of all, Genna, that was really, really informative. And I know that there's a few people, because what I've been doing is going back and forth with some emails and giving people the links. The recording of this you will get the recording of this in a couple of days once we've edited it and shaped it up. So, you know, you can sit back with a cup of tea, bourbon biscuit, and listen to Genna again, go over this. But that was really excellent. Right, Natalie, are you ready?
I am.
Great. Let me just introduce Natalie. Natalie is Director of Grants and Impacts. Natalie grew up in Kent and after studying and traveling, has spent all her working life in the voluntary sector, mainly in campaigning and management roles in London for national charities. These include Amnesty International and the Preschools Learning Alliance, and most recently worked with Involve. She has good understanding of the third sector within Kent and Medway, knowledge she has used every day in her work with KCF. I was going to say KFC a minute there. KCF. In her hometown of Maidstone, Natalie is a founding member of a local charity and a governor for a local primary school. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Good morning, everybody. It's lovely to be here. So following on from Genna's really comprehensive presentation about applying for grants, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about community foundations and how we operate, and then give you some of my kind of personal top tips for applying for grants. Some of them sort of reiterate a little bit what some of Genna has said, and some of them actually I have a slightly different take on. So hopefully that will be useful for you. So I'm going to be talking about Kent Community Foundation, because that's obviously what I know, but there are 46 community foundations across the UK. So wherever you live, there will be a community foundation operating in your area that you will be able to apply to and make a relationship with. So we're all independent charities. We're all kind of part of a membership organisation. We all operate a little bit differently, but the general kind of focus is about philanthropy and getting grants out to frontline organisations who are making a really good difference in their local communities. So in Kent, we've been going since 2001, so it's our 20th anniversary this year, so a big celebration year for us. Our business is grant making. We're a registered charity. In an average year, we make around sort of 3.5 million worth of grants to around sort of 600, 650 organisations. So in terms of scale, we're not huge, you know, we're not like the lottery, but we're sort of, I would say we're kind of moderate, medium scale in terms of Kent anyway. Our average grant is around 4,000, sort of £5,000, usually for sort of a period of a year. And we focus wherever we can on smaller organisations. So those with sort of an income up to 100,000 a year. So that's kind of that's sort of our bread and butter work, is getting grants out to small frontline grassroots organisations. We operate on a sort of a quarterly cycle. So basically we're making decisions on applications throughout the year regularly. So our funding is always open, essentially, for applications to come in, and most community foundations work in this way. So it's just a rolling cycle of applications coming in, quarterly decisions, and you know, on we go. We have sort of 5 main themes that our grant making is focused on. So the themes are, the most popular by far is our children, young people and families theme. A lot of our grants go to organisations working in that sector. Then we have an elderly and isolated theme, also very popular. We have a vulnerable adults theme. So grants going out under that theme are around supporting people with physical disabilities, learning disabilities, mental health organisations working with refugees, asylum seekers, organisations working with people moving on from domestic abuse, or those sorts of categories. And then we have an employability and skills theme, which is all around, so that actually for you guys, I think would probably be the most interesting thing potentially. That's around bringing people closer to the workplace. It's around raising confidence and aspirations and getting people into volunteering and working with NEETs and all those sorts of things. And the final theme, which actually we're just about to launch, so it's our fifth theme, and our new theme is around the environment. So that's around supporting work to increase the quality of the natural environment in Kent and Medway, and the lived environment too, and getting people out into nature and, you know, benefiting from it. Enormous impact on well-being. So I mean, those are our themes, but the overall kind of focus, general focus of what we do is just to improve the quality of life of disadvantaged people across Kent and Medway. And that's the focus of community foundations all over the country. So if you're working to do that in some way, if you're working to achieve some sort of social impact, then it's highly likely that your community foundation may have some funding that, you know, you would be able to apply for. The costs that we cover are all of those that Genna mentioned, actually. So we consider project costs, we consider capital costs, and we consider unrestricted core costs as well. I mean, we're sort of, I think, a bit ahead of the game on that in Kent, in that for years now I've been pushing our funders to support core costs, so unrestricted funding, because we know that organisations value that enormously, and they know how to spend their money, you know, better than grant makers do sometimes. So we are happy to consider core cost requests. So that's just a grant, and we'd say to you, you know, just spend it as you need, essentially. So that's kind of how community foundations operate. If I think about what I would tell you in terms of key tips and key points, I think I've got 7 in my head, which are hopefully useful to you. So the first one is around building blocks. So every application we have in has to have the relevant building blocks in place before we can consider it for like a full assessment. And by building blocks, I mean the governance has to be right. So the organisation has to have some sort of governing document, constitution, or memorandum and articles of association, basically some document which sets out the purpose of the group, how it operates, what would happen to any grant funding if the organisation were to fold. It's a really key document. So, I mean, the sorts of groups we fund are registered charities, obviously. We're happy to support community interest companies. We're happy to support companies limited by guarantee, not by share, but by guarantee. We're also happy to support unconstituted community groups, so tiny little groups that aren't big enough to be a registered charity, but are still doing a good job. But the governing document has to be in place. And in terms of the management of the operation, we look for 3 unrelated directors, trustees, management committee, whatever you want to call it. So you've got to have the document, you've got to have those 3 sort of key people in place. And then the third thing is the bank account, of course. So you have to have a bank account set up in the name of the organisation with at least 2 unrelated bank signatories registered to it. So, I mean, fairly basic stuff there, but all those 3 building blocks have to be in place before we can consider an organisation for funding. The second thing I would say is that it's useful, I think, to understand the psychology of grant making a little bit, because it can feel, I know, it can feel from an applicant's point of view like grant makers are sort of, you know, fortresses, impregnable. They've got all the money and they're doing their best to try and kind of bat applications away, because it's such a competitive process, isn't it? But actually the opposite is true. You know, grant makers are socially minded people who are really keen to get funds out to good organisations who are doing good work, and that's actually their job as well. That's what they're there to do. So they are actually in your corner. You know, they are willing you to be successful. Certainly at Kent Community Foundation, we work a lot with organisations to improve the quality of their applications sometimes. But I think it's generally true that that going into it with sort of a positive mindset and trying to kind of understand that the grant maker is on your side and they're there to, their job is actually to get money out the door, then I think that can help actually in your kind of grant making journey. The third point kind of touches a little bit on what Genna said, is about building a relationship. If you can at all, I mean, I think it's so valuable to try and to talk to grant makers. And I mean pre-application by that, as well as sort of during and post-application. So not all grant makers are as sort of approachable. I do understand that, but there are a lot that are happy to talk to applicants during the whole process. So, I mean, I would just reach out by email or phone, you know, however they prefer, and say, I've seen this funding opportunity, thinking of applying. This is the sort of thing I want funding for, very brief. Is it something you would welcome? And you have just made that connection there with the grant maker, who is potentially, if you do decide to submit, is going to be the one who's assessing your application. And, you know, we're all as a human being, they're just going to remember that contact, and it is going to be a positive. It's going to be a small tick in your favour, even though it might not be part of the official sort of assessment process. As a human being, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I got that really nice email from this organisation, and look, they've applied, and it's just there in your head. So always worth doing that. I mean, lots of people don't do that. They just apply cold. So the first you know the organisation is when the application comes in. But I'm telling you, it does make a difference if somebody's bothered to have a chat or an email beforehand. So just I would recommend you do that. Equally, post-application, stay in touch. It may be that the grant maker has questions about the application. It's really rare for us actually that an application comes in and we have absolutely no questions about any of it. It's like 99% of the time we have at least one or two questions. So if you do get that contact from the grant maker, you know, reply as quickly as you can. It's unbelievable that some applicants will take ages to get back to us if we've asked a couple of follow-up questions, and you think, really? I mean, do you actually want this funding? Are you interested in receiving a grant from us when you're not replying to, you know, kind of quite basic questions? And I know organisations are busy, I get that. I mean, I understand, but it's probably worth sort of putting a bit of resource into that, you know, into that communication with the grant maker. So key, build a relationship if you can. The fourth thing I would say is just, in terms of what you put on your form, presume we know nothing. Presume we know nothing about you. So you're going to focus on, this is a different way of looking at it, cutting it up really from what Genna was talking about. But the key things we want to know are what you want funding for, why you want funding, and how you will spend it. Those are the three key things essentially. And we have our system is all online, so, you know, we have questions around this. But in terms of the assessor, those are the three key boxes that kind of, you know, need to be ticked. In terms of why you want funding, I think there's an interesting distinction between the need for what you want to do and the demand for what you want to do. So I would always think about just a couple of sentences explaining how you know that there's a need for this particular work that you want to do. And then also a separate kind of line of thought around the demand. So how do you know that there may be a need there, but how actually do you know that if you do set this work up, if you do try to engage with people and offer this service, how do you know that they're actually going to be receptive and that they're going to come, they're going to want to come along? We've had several projects where on paper it's been absolutely brilliant and the need for it has been there. I think there was one area of Maidstone where an organisation noted an issue around sort of lack of exercise and obesity in a certain population, and the Borough Council was confirming this, you know, with all their data. There's statistics on that, don't they? So this organisation set up a healthy eating club and a walking club based in the local community centre. Brilliant project, but you know, like 2 people turned up to take part because they'd not done the work around engaging with residents and kind of building that relationship and building an interest and getting a waiting list going, you know, inviting people in. So actually, although it was a great idea, it just didn't work. So think about the distinction between need and demand and try and express that in your application. Then the how you will spend it is important too. Is just explain your assumptions in your budget. You don't need to go into a lot of detail, but you know, rather than saying £5,000 for an administrator, kind of full stop, we want to know, so how many hours a week is that, and how many weeks a year is that? We need to kind of be able to sort of quantify it a little bit. So just break it down a little bit. It's like, you know, when you do maths exams and they say, you know, show your workings. It's that thing, just show your workings for the budget. The 5th thing, really important, I think, be specific. Again, Genna touched on this. And interestingly, Genna was talking about appealing to the heart a little bit. And I disagree on that. I think a really kind of clean, sharp appeal to the head kind of application for us seems to work much better. I mean, yeah, really. So what we're after is the specifics of a project. So if you're talking about running, I don't know, a holiday scheme for children over the summer in a sort of a disadvantaged part of Margate, that's great as an overview. But then we would want to understand, so how many children do you think you're going to be working with? Have you got schools lined up referring children in? How many hours a day is it going to be? How many days a week is it going to be? What kind of activities are they going to take part in? And that's it. So that's probably just, you know,
5 minutes, Natalie.
Thank you. 3 or 4 sentences. But we need to understand what's going to be happening on the ground a little bit. Although we don't want tons and tons of detail, so it's kind of a fine balance. I do accept that. So the 6th point I would share with you is about impact. So impact is not an afterthought. I mean, people talk about outcomes and outputs, and actually we don't use that language anymore. We talk about impact. So for us, it's all about the difference made. So the thing to keep in your head is, if I spend this money, what difference is it going to make to the lives of the people that we're working with? And how can I kind of reflect that back to the grant maker? So impact is really important. And we will tell you at the beginning of the grant what kind of impact we want from you. So you know, as you're spending that grant, you know, the kind of the information, the data you should capture, so that you can then share that with us at the end. And like Genna said, case studies are great. We love case studies, and we love video kind of impact as well. It doesn't all have to be written. You know, somebody just talking to camera about their experience is really powerful. And we then share that with our fund holders. So we have a whole range of different fund holders, and they're all very interested in the impact of the grants that, you know, their funds are facilitating. So we do share that. It's not just an administrative exercise, this whole impact thing. For us, it's really valuable, and it helps us get more funds in for the future. It's an investment in your next application impact. So that's the way to think about it. It's actually the first step in your next application. Because if we had made a grant and we've not had any impact back on it, and sometimes that happens, you know, we chase for it, but sometimes, you know, it doesn't come through, then, you know, that's an issue for us, and that would make us consider whether or not we'd want to fund that organisation again. And the last thing I would say to you is just about handling rejection, because it will happen. So ask for feedback. That's always a positive. The way we do it, because, you know, our resources are quite limited, is that those organisations that are regretted, they get kind of a standard regrets email from us, and then those that come back to us and ask for a bit more, and a few do every time, then we'll respond with a much more detailed analysis of why their application wasn't successful. So if you get a generic regrets, I would say, and you're interested in finding out a bit more about where you went wrong, I would say always follow that up with an email. And you'll probably get something back most times, I would say, because that's the way we do it. We don't have time to give specific feedback to everybody initially, but we would always respond if somebody comes back to us. But just be resilient, because actually sometimes it's just a numbers game. Applying for grants, it can be a really good application, but if the pot is finite, then sometimes good applications do get regretted, and it's actually not necessarily a reflection on what's in the application. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it isn't. I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes there's an element of luck in all of this. So you might submit one application, in March to us, which is unsuccessful, and a very similar application in November could be successful. I mean, it is a little bit random. You can really definitely stack the odds in your favour, of course, which is what we've been talking about here today. But just being realistic, you just have to sort of accept that, and just don't be downhearted. Just be resilient in that front. And the last thing to say is that we try to keep our forms very short, because we know time is precious for everybody out there doing the hard work. So our forms are short. We do multi-year funding. We do course support. And I think a lot of community foundations there have that approach as well. So I think probably that's all I wanted to share with you. I think okay for time, Stephen, and happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Natalie. Right, Tev, we'll go straight into some of the questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. So the first question that came through was from Sean McCarthy. Sean, would you like to ask the question yourself if you're still with us, or would you prefer that I just ask it on your behalf?
You could unmute yourself, Sean, if you're still here.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Sorry. You can ask that for me if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Something that I was quite interested in as well, actually. The theme of today's event and all the information that's being provided generally is in relation to applications for grants from an organisation with a charitable element. Do grants exist for commercial organisations? And if so, where could we find them?
Yeah, they do in Kent. I know there's an enterprise arm, if you like, of the local authority of Kent County Council, and they have a whole range of business support for entrepreneurs and people starting out on their sort of social enterprise journey. I mean, we do support social enterprises, but generally they're registered as a kind of in the CIC, the community interest company format, which is a bit of trading, but for trading for social good, and charities trade as well. But we would need that kind of that governance format to be set up. But there are other funds available. If you're just you're one person or two people, you don't want to go down that route. And I'm pretty sure that business enterprise support is available across the country. Although, I mean, I don't know in as much detail as I do for Kent.
Thank you, Natalie. Actually, on that point, and as Stephen mentioned at the outset of this session, Forward Enterprise Services do offer micro grants to organisations who do not necessarily need to have a charitable mission. It's only £1,000. It's quite a simple process. So if any of you are interested in that, please do contact either myself or Stephen. And just on that point, finally, Kath, thank you very much for that prompt. As you all should be aware, each area, geography, should have a local enterprise, a local economic partnership rather, and they would be a really, really cool starting point to try and find out some information about grants in your area, in addition to the resources and links that we've already been provided. So thank you for that. Moving on, James at Karma Presence. He works for or runs a wellness organisation. Are there any particular links to organisation to grant makers who kind of specialise in the whole well-being and wellness sector?
I would say that this goes down to your prospect research. I would go and look at the sources that have been provided on this slide. There's also the Charity Excellence Framework, which is another free database that you could use. But I would say that that's for you to go and have a look at the different prospects that are out there and that align with your mission. But definitely, yeah, have a look through, go through all those resources and have a look. If you know, I mentioned before about the competitor analysis. Are there any other organisations that are already doing what you're doing? Go through their accounts and have a look.
I mean, community foundations generally support loads of wellbeing activities, projects, sort of interventions. We do in Kent, and I know all of the others do. But then, you know, you would have to. It depends how you're set up. As we've said before, you would have to be set up as a kind of an entity in the right way to apply.
Thank you both. Moving on. I've been monitoring the chat as we're progressing. Grace has made an excellent comment about the Women in Innovation competition grant of 50,000. So do check that out for those who are interested. But just reverting back to the questions, Simon raised a question. He's about to, I believe, form a partnership with another charity in Oxford, and he was wondering how that can be presented to a grant maker.
Is he saying sorry, you go.
So is he merging with an existing organisation, or just working in partnership with, or being commissioned by?
Simon, would you like to unmute yourself and perhaps give a bit more clarity?
Yeah, hi everybody, and thank you to the speakers today as well. So we're looking to partnership with them, so they would be kind of providing some of the facilities and equipment, and we will be delivering the program.
Okay, so are they looking to apply for funding in order to commission you, or are they expecting you to apply for funding?
We're exploring at the moment.
Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, depending upon how you're set up, for most grant makers, they're a registered charity, are they, Simon?
Yes.
So, yeah. So, I mean, the simplest thing probably is that they apply for funding for the project where they will bring you in. Definitely, that will be the most straightforward way of approaching certainly community foundations and most other sort of charitable trusts. I would think it would be easier for them in that way. So that's what I would suggest. Yeah.
So are you saying that they're going to be the lead? Sorry.
My CIC will be driving the program. They're looking to kind of provide the facilities as well as kind of ticking some of the other boxes around kind of client data and all the other good stuff that they do in the organisation. Yeah, so I'd make the application from whoever is going to be leading. So if it comes to writing to trusts and foundations, obviously we talked about structured applications that were different, but if you're putting like a case of support together, which I think is what you're asking, like, are you asking exactly where you would include it in your case for support? Yeah, that'd be useful as well. Yeah, okay. So I would put it underneath, if it was a merger or something, I would talk about it from the beginning when I'm talking about my organisation. But otherwise, I would talk about it probably in the project details. I've mentioned it in there. So I think that you'll see that on my slides, I say that as well. Brilliant. Does that help? Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you both for your report. Yeah, and if you want, I've got examples. If you want to email me, I have got examples of where I've introduced other organisations that we partner with, and I could show you how I introduce it in the project details if you like. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Thank you. I've just noted that we're just slightly running over time. Okay. Feel free to log off if you've got other commitments or are desperate for some lunch. But for those who've got some questions, we're happy to spend another 5-10 minutes on the session. Janine raised a really cool question. She works for or has formed an employment support organisation called Employment Support for All, and it would appear from the nature of her question that she's that organisation has been newly formed, and the question is, how do you suggest that a newly formed organisation could apply to be supported by a grant?
Hello.
Have I got that right, Janine?
Yes, that's right. We've recently set up, I've come from an employer engagement background where I've worked with large organisations that are in the welfare to work sector. And we're a newly formed CIC that supports, sorry, there's a ambulance or something going past the office, disadvantaged people into employment. And we're looking to try and get some more funding, or to get some funding, because we're used to getting a high number of outcomes. We have a lot of people being referred to us either directly or by other organisations like the job centres and other charities and other CICs. And the whole point of our project wasn't to turn people away, and wasn't to say that we had, you know, distinctive criteria and things. So we're just trying to see how we can get funding to be able to support, because the money that we have got, by the time we've helped people buy ID or fares to work or fares to interviews and things like that, we really are sort of struggling to, you know, more is going out really than is coming in. So
yeah, I mean, I think because you're a new organisation, so I would, you know, pay particular attention to the demonstration of needs for the work that you're doing, and also I would talk about the track record that you obviously have in the sector, although not you know, not at this current, in the sort of the current format that it's in. Talk about any partnerships that you have, any organisations that are, you know, going to be referring into you, because it's all about establishing credibility, I suppose, isn't it? Because you're new. But I mean, community foundations definitely support new initiatives if they're reassured on the sort of the provenance of the organisation and the need and the focus for it. So the fact that you're new in itself needn't be a project, but you probably just need to focus a bit more on establishing kind of your credentials, I suppose. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
agree. And like checking just making sure when you are researching that you're checking that eligibility, you know, because they may say they want 3 years worth of accounts, for example.
That's
As
what
a
I'm
new,
saying.
yeah, exactly. So like, I completely agree with Natalie saying building up that credibility, but like you were saying as well about having the relationship with the funders, so contacting them before to start building that rapport. And obviously it sounds like you're kind of like talking about capacity building. It sounds like what you're doing already is great, but you want to be in a stronger financial position. Make sure you're focusing obviously on what you're going to be on all your applications you should do.
Yeah,
Focus on what you're going to be delivering, you know, really like the impact that you're going to be having.
yeah, the whole reason for setting it up is because, as you know, with organisations that are funded to deliver funded programmes, there's an eligibility criteria, and a lot of people I saw, because I did a lot of work with homeless organisations and different things like that, I see a lot of people that fall through the cracks, that are not able to get support, hence the name Employment for All. So the model was that large organisations that sort of use me to help them get their job outcomes because they have the funding, pay a fee for that, but then out of that fee we use that to, as I say, get the support for people that have fallen through the cracks or don't have that support. But the numbers that I'm getting through are so great. I mean, I even sort of also work part-time as well, because literally the money that's going out really is so vast, because there are so many people that aren't being picked up by agencies, or they've left prison and not getting any support, or they're homeless, and or that, you know, they're rough sleeping.
So that, I mean, right there, that kind of that paragraph that you've just shared with us, that is your case for support. Really. You just made a really clear kind of you know, description of why there's a need for what you want to do. So just write that down, basically.
Right.
I think that's it. You know, it's really compelling. I mean, I would definitely look at that application positively if it came into me. So
thank you. Okay.
I'm just aware of the time too.
Yeah, just got one more question, if we may, Stephen. That was from Val from Arcbound Foundation. I think it may have been answered by now, but I'll still obviously ask the question. So obviously, Natalie, you were talking about grants from providing grants from your own organisation, the KCF. Are your grants specific for work and delivery within the Kent area? I would imagine it is, but and if so, I'm sure that other counties will also have similar kind of charitable trusts and foundations who provide grants. Is that correct, Natalie?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, like I said at the beginning, there's 46 community foundations around the UK, so every area is covered by a community foundation. And then in addition to Community Foundation, there's all the independent charitable trusts, grant making. So the resources that Genna shared about kind of researching all of that would be really valuable. I mean, even if you just go onto Google and type in where, you know, your county, so Oxfordshire grant making trusts, you know, you'll get a huge list, although that might be a bit overwhelming. So, but it would be a starting point, you know. So yeah, there's, how many was it, Genna? 8,000, did you say, in total?
I think it's like 8,800. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yes, there's some of them are very small, some of them are huge. You know, there's a whole range. Some of them are really unrestricted in what they want to fund. Some of them are very specific. But you just need to do a little bit of research. Look at the resources that Genna shared. She'll help. Those will help with that.
Thank you. Over to you again, Stephen, to close up.
Wow. Do you know what? Listening to the vibe and the flow of this, I think, Tev, we're going to definitely have to think about a part 2 later on in a couple of months' time. And Genna and Natalie, would you be available for a part in a couple of months' time?
Yeah.
Thumbs up. First of all, guys, thank you very much for your presentations. It was really excellent, and you know, it gave a lot of people food for thought. And my focus is always trying to make my clients and the entrepreneurs that we work with smarter entrepreneurs. Try not to work as hard, but try and work as smarter. And I think a lot of the information you both provided today gets people thinking a lot more about their approach in a more strategic and systematic way. And that's what we wanted to get across. And looking at the comments from both of you, you have definitely achieved your objectives today. So thank you very much. I will be here back tomorrow, and we're going to look at the tendering process, which for those that are registered, that's going to be a really another interesting process and to go through. And we've got a great speaker lined up for that too. Finally, just to plug again, the Enterprise Challenge. If you're looking for an investment of £500 cash injection, you would like to pitch your business to a panel of senior business people, feel free to contact me, drop me an email, drop me a line, and we can talk about that. That's the Enterprise Challenge on the 16th. And thank you for your time. It was really a very stimulating conversation, and definitely a part 2 of. Tev, any final things I missed out on?
I'm just anxious to crack on with my leave, but thank you very much again on behalf of Forward Enterprise Services for attending. It was a great session, and we'll be sharing the slides and also the link to the our YouTube channel for the recording of the event by the end of the week, hopefully. Great. Thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day, whatever you're doing, and take care. Natalie and Genna once again.
Thanks a lot, guys. Bye.